So when we're talking about really how this breaks down into economic impact, I wanted to show a few additional data points. So here in Texas, the numbers that you're looking at on your screen, these are Texas labor force participation rates by educational attainment. And that's really a fancy way of saying when you really look at individuals that are currently in the labor force here in Texas, and you're looking at the educational attainment of those individuals who are working, these are sort of how things break out over the last couple of years. So in 2020, we had about 53% of individuals here in Texas that were in the labor force, which is much lower than other individuals with higher levels of credentials or degrees in education in Texas. If you go to another national statistic, and you're talking about the US unemployment rate, what you'll really learn, next slide, is that when it comes to those who lack a high school equivalency, they're also the highest percent of individuals who are receiving unemployment. So when you're looking at those numbers kind of side by side, what you have is you have a lower percentage of individuals that are actually participating in work actively in the labor force. And on the flip side of that, they're also the first to get on unemployment, right? They're the highest percent on unemployment. So you have those that aren't participating at all. And then you have those that when they do participate in the labor force, they're also the first to kind of make the initial cut when it comes to reduction in workforce happening out there with our employers. So those are kind of some more staggering statistics there. Next slide. And really, what does all of this kind of culminate to mean? And what does it really mean for us here in Texas? And why are we continuing to have this conversation on how we can better collaborate for our services and really focusing more on students who are coming to us for those services? All of these numbers and illiteracy in general kind of permeate into our societal fabrics in very different ways. Again, lots of research on there, out there about this, but for those of you that may be coming into this as a new person wanting to learn more, let me kind of break down a couple of things I want to point out. One of the things is that illiteracy is largely related and correlated to poverty. So poverty levels here in Texas hold true to our national percentages as well. And so income is strongly related to literacy levels. The higher your education, obviously, the higher your literacy, the less you're going to be falling into those poverty, below those poverty guidelines. Employer expenses, workers' compensation claims, loss of productivity also have a high return in terms of our working. Conversations coming from employers saying we have workers' comp claims, and also loss of productivity for individuals who may have low literacy levels or lack that high school diploma or that credential. Crime, incarceration, and recidivism. We talked about this a little bit ago with our earlier stats, but I know here in Texas, with our federally funded programs, we have been putting forth a lot of effort into making sure that we're working with our statewide partner through our Texas Education Agency, which is Wyndham ISD. They serve all of our state prisons to sort of eradicate and want to make sure that individuals that are incarcerated are getting their high school diplomas or an equivalent, I should say, so that when they do re-enter into society, they have that under their belt and they're going to be less susceptible to fall into recidivism. So there's lots of great work happening out there, both with our AEL funded grantees and things happening at the state level to help support, the improvement of illiteracy within those that are incarcerated or justice involved. Take into account generational illiteracy. State-supported households here in Texas, that would be households that are on some form of public assistance like TANF or SNAP. We have, research going back and dating and saying this is a generational problem with illiteracy in the household, when you have a member of the household, the head of household, who is illiterate, what does that really mean for children that are growing up in that household? And trying to think of ways, and that's the work that we're all collaboratively really doing, is trying to focus our efforts and our money on those most in need so that we can end that sort of generational illiteracy that is occurring there. Healthcare cost, well, if you can't read a prescription label, that's a problem. And many Americans cannot read prescription labels or really follow the more detailed and articulated instructions that they receive from many healthcare providers. And what does that really mean in terms of individual healthcare costs going up, not only for those individuals, but also for us as a state and a nation? So there's lots of things out there, and there's lots of research that's been done, but what does it really all mean? And today, I think we want to really focus on how do we better collaborate our services. What we do know is that we have a lot of need here in Texas, and we have limited funding to really support that need. So it makes a lot of sense from a financial perspective, and it just makes a lot of sense from the student's perspective on how we can do this and create opportunities in our own communities for individuals who have a need. Next slide. So money doesn't grow on trees, unfortunately. I mean, if one of you guys has a money tree out there, please let me know. I'll come and knock on your door. But it doesn't grow on trees, and to my knowledge, it also does not organically reproduce. So we have to be very mindful and purposeful for how we are collaborating. Next slide. So we have some complex challenges in our local communities. We have complex challenges here at the state level as well, and we really need innovative solutions to some of those challenges. So today I want to begin to kind of talk about how do we collaborate to really address the demand that exists in the state. We know there's a lot of individuals out there that need support. There's a lot of individuals out there that could benefit from our services, but where do we start? So when we're talking about our federally funded programs and our nonprofit literacy organizations or CBOs, I want to talk about three big points that I want to make. And the panelists and presenters that we have today will continue to kind of talk about what they're doing in their local communities to kind of address some of these. The first one is meet the students' goals and objectives. So over the last several years in the federally funded programs, which I manage, we've been talking about more and more sort of diving into why a student darkens our door. Why are they there? And in the past, it was sort of, well, I want to get my GED, right? I want to learn to speak English better. And that was the why that was coming from the student. But when you're really talking about doing what's best for the student and meeting a student's goals and objectives, you have to go the second step, which is, why are you getting your credential? Why are you wanting to learn to speak better English or improve your literacy skills? It's the second piece of that information that goes into and is should really be the qualifier for the work that that student does with us in the services that they are receiving from us. And that is where we can begin to talk about what is the best suited trajectory for that student and who is best to serve that student based off of their goals and objectives, based off of their initial assessment with us, and sort of where they are when they come in that door and where they want to be a year from there, 2 years from there, 5 years from there. So this idea of having one door, but multiple points of entry. And that's my second point. So creating a system, and today, guys, I'm really thinking like, here, and knowing that we're probably here, and then we're going to take a lot of time to get there. But if we're really going to talk about innovation and we're really going to talk about how do we make this better, I think it's better to think of the big picture and then start to very specifically target those individual things that we have to do with our federally funded programs and our local organizations to better set us up for success. So one door, multiple points of entry for a student. And what that means is a student can come in through any door within our literacy system at the local level. And we are going to have and be dedicated to having an understanding of each other's missions, goals, and objectives within our own organizations and with our partners. So that when the student comes into the door, we are able to point them to and come up with a plan for that student to meet those goals. The last point that I want to talk about is strong referral systems. So once the student comes into this one door and they have these multiple points of entry that they can get the services that they need to meet their goals and objectives, there has to be a strong referral system at the local level. It's not a competition. There's plenty of need out there. And I will tell you this, and you already know this, which is the best advertisement for any program, especially these services, is word of mouth. And so as the quality of our referral systems improve, as the quality of the services that we're providing to the student that's meeting their goals improves, word of mouth will happen and things will start to take place, and we will start to see more individuals coming into our system. But we have to kind of be prepared within that to really collaborate and move that individual to the program that is best suited to fit their needs. And I wanted to give you two examples. One example is if you're a nonprofit literacy organization and you have an individual that's coming into your program that has a degree from, their home country. They're highly skilled, they're highly trained, but they have a language barrier. The federally funded programs, meaning our grantees here in Texas that come out from the Texas Workforce Commission, have a specific target and have a specific mission to serve those individuals and create an opportunity to move those individuals back into those industries in which they're credentialed, back into the workforce with an intensity and a rigor. If as a nonprofit organization, maybe that does not fit into your funding structure, maybe that doesn't fit into what you have the capacity to do, it's a great opportunity to do a handoff because that's what the students' goals and objectives are. On the flip side of that, when we have students that come in through our door, meaning a federally funded door, one of our AEL grantees, and that person has the only goal that they have is really family literacy. They have the job that they want, they're good to go, they want to just learn and speak better English for the purposes of maybe helping their daughter with homework or a grandchild or something like that. Or you have an individual that's coming in through our door that has very low literacy in their home language. We know right away that that is going to take some intensity, that is going to take some time. And our federal dollars, because they are federal dollars, and these are not things necessarily that the state says, but those federal dollars are attached to a lot of compliance and they're attached to a lot of performance. And that is just the way that it is. And I feel like the better that we understand each other and kind of where we are on all of these sort of topics nobody wants to talk about really, the better opportunity we have to work more closely together. And so for the purposes of today and the objectives that I really want to get into for today is hearing from individuals in the field that are working collaboratively and some of the gives and the takes that they have come up with at the local level to implement a collaborative partnership. So in order to address demand and access for adult literacy services in Texas, they're going to be walking us through some of the things that they have created locally and how they're really looking and tackling these challenges through thoughtful collaboration and partnership, best practice sharing, and of course, blended funding. So with that, I'm going to hand this over to our first panelist and presenter, Wes Young and Janine Maldonado. You guys take it away.
Okay, thank you, Mahalia. That's a tough act to follow. That was some really good data you shared. Thanks a bunch for that. And let me turn my camera on so you know it's really me. All right. I just want to say thanks for letting us be a part of this, because we've been doing this for quite a while and never really realized how big of a deal it was. You know, when you're operating in your own little world, sometimes it's hard to imagine that everybody's not doing it. And so this is a great opportunity for us to share our partnership and what we do together. So Wes is really the star of this show. I'm just going to give you some background on how we came to this point. We're the consortium for Tarrant County, and you can see all of our members are on here. We consist of 3 ISDs along with Tarrant County College. We also have, of course, Tarrant Literacy Coalition, and then Linked Ed, which was formerly the Learning Center of North Texas. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, so let me just share where we were before all this came about. Tarrant Literacy Coalition has been a part of our consortium for many, many years. Even prior to the word consortium, we had a committee here in Tarrant County, an advisory committee, and all of the members that you're seeing were pretty much part of that advisory committee early on. So we learned to play together nicely a long time ago, and it's really a family here. And with that being said, you know, we still had challenges. We all have requirements that we need to make. When I started back at the board in 2016, I came back to Tarrant County at the board level in charge of the AEL department or the AEL program. We had an issue with referrals, and so at the time I came back, it was kind of crazy. We had students calling all these numbers asking, do you have classes? Can I get in? They were being sent, you know, to a class site. The doors were locked, or they didn't know where to go in. It was just a big mess. And so for the students, that's frustrating. And then who knows how many walked away and didn't, you know, get any services. We had participants that were being put on wait lists. They were kind of sitting on a list at all these different locations and were not getting outreached and didn't know where to call back to even find out where they were. So we started to work on that. So in 2017 and 18, starting in 2016, we worked on a referral process. And part of that was, why aren't we utilizing our partnerships well? Tarrant Literacy at the time was already referring students to our programs. They were that connect between the community-based organizations and ourselves and AEL, and they were just automatically doing a lot of the things that we needed, and we weren't utilizing them enough to do that. So what we did is we reached out to the executive director at the time, which was previous to Wes, Catherine Thompson, and said, why don't you think about operating a call center for us so that we can not only refer people through a one-stop shop, but also kind of start to meet the needs of individuals as they come into the program where they are. So by doing some type of an intake or finding out what are their goals, you know, what is it that they really want to come out the other end with. So that's kind of where the conversations took off. And so my last point I want to leave with you before Wes takes over and kind of goes into the meat of it, because again, he and his team are the star of our show. We sat down with Tarrant Literacy, and they're actually, they run our call center. We do fund the call center, and with that, they actually are attached to one phone number for entire Tarrant County. So anybody in Tarrant County that calls is going to get Wes's group, and then they get put into the system, and then of course are referred to either, whether it be a community-based organization or one of our AEL providers. We always have the intention, and the beauty of this relationship is every one of us have the student at heart. We want what's best for the student, and we never want to push them in a direction that they're not wanting to go. So This is where Wes's team really just kind of picks up the ball and takes off. And I'm going to let him go ahead and explain the process. Wes?
Yeah. So thanks for allowing me to participate. So really the idea of the call center all came about as this idea for, being just the one number to call. Whenever somebody is doing, even just a basic Google search, our website is usually the first thing that comes up when somebody's searching for, ESL classes or GED classes in Fort Worth or wherever. So the idea behind it was to, be that one number to call and also be a very kind of warm and inviting voice for people's first experience going into adult education, because as we all know, a lot of these adult learners, it's scary to admit that you need the classes, and it's sort of a anxiety producing experience just to even make that call. And so what we do is we do a very detailed intake with the adult learner. We find out obviously some of the basic things in terms of like where they live, but we also try to find out as much background information from them as we can without, being too prying. The reason behind this is because we obviously want to make an accurate referral. We don't want to refer somebody to a program that meets only in the mornings when they've got a 9-to-5 job. But we also want to be mindful of any potential barriers that the students may have, childcare and transportation being the top two across our program. So if somebody needs access to childcare or, public transportation, something along those lines, we only have certain locations that we can refer them to, right? And then in terms of the actual intake process, we maintain a database that has all of the student information that we take during the intake process. We update that database as new records come in, and once a referral is made, then we complete the process and consider that referral checked off and made. So next slide, please. Like I said, because we are funded through TWC funds, we obviously want to try to make those referrals into those state-funded programs because of the, the numbers of students that our programs are required to make. However, sometimes those state-funded programs do not meet the client's needs, and that's where community and faith-based organizations and nonprofits really come in and fill in those gaps, especially for things like childcare, which isn't always available at funded sites. So we can make those referrals out into community-based programs where that will meet their need, all the while making sure that the clients know that there are some additional services that are available once they complete their program, and making sure that they have a means to contact us back. With that database, we can track returning calls and that sort of thing. And so that's where that preparation for more rigorous programs and training comes in, because it can be real easy to go through an ESL program, but then what comes next? Is there some IET or career training that's available that can benefit their families even more? So this slide just says, what our call center phone number is. So 817-402-7555. I will say that this is a really good thing to consider, especially in some of the larger consortiums that exist across the state. If it's something that organizations can manage, then I would definitely encourage folks to implement this type of program. The really nice thing about it being a local call center as opposed to sort of a statewide call center is because we as a small nonprofit, we're really the ones that are tied into the community best. I came from the Arlington Public Library, which was a funded class provider here in Tarrant County. And I remember the days when just worrying about my own program was the only thing I had time for, right? So in terms of being able to get information out or, being able to contact churches down the road to find out if they're still offering classes, what those classes look like. The community-based nonprofit really has the advantage over sort of a centralized call number because of those connections that we have in the community.
Yeah, and I want to just say one thing about this whole relationship that we have and being able to have the ability or the benefit of having CBOs to be able to refer some of the students or participants to. We do offer services, of course, to the lower literacy level students. However, it's a limited capacity to be able to do that. And just going back to that information that Mahalia was sharing earlier, you can see with that 53% of people in less than high school equivalency, that just screams volumes for the need for these type of services. We just don't have the ability to serve the number of students that are participants that are looking for this type of service. And also, again, with my background and coming from the classroom and seeing students, face to face, it's really not a good situation to be putting those students in with other leveled students, because you're setting them up for a situation where there's almost this desperate feeling, right? Like, how long am I going to be sitting here doing this? So if we really can get, if as a state we could get to the whole concept of serving the students where they are with what their needs are, more in an environment, being able to give them that one-on-one and preparing them for the ABE or ASE levels, moving them up. It seems like a more natural trajectory. And that's really what we're shooting for in Tarrant County. We'd like to have that trajectory so that we can meet them where they are, serve them, quality, move them to the next level, and just keep moving them through to that training or employment, of course, which is our ultimate outcome. So this is really a very, very good pipeline model. And like, I love how Mahalia said on one of her slides, it's not a competition. Like, there's so many individuals that need our help. There's no reason that we should compete with each other. And we're so powerful together. We all have something to bring to the table, and we're so powerful together. And that's just a message which doesn't have anything to do with the CBOs, but it's my preach to the workforce centers as well, to say we all can do this together and bring our resources, pull them together, and we could just really provide stellar service to individuals. So thank you, Wes, for all you guys do.
We're proud to be a part of it.
So now we're going to go ahead and hand it over to Melanie.
Fantastic. Thank you both very much for the work that you do and that we're going to continue to be doing together. So hi, everybody. Melanie Fisk here, as you can well see. What I'm going to do is ground kind of who I am. Steve introduced me. I'm currently the Senior Director of Adult Education here at Baker Ripley. If we can go to the next slide, I want to tell you a little bit about Baker Ripley. And you may be thinking, depending if you're on the funded or non-funded side, we've been talking about CBOs, community-based organizations on one side, and kind of funded on the other. Baker Ripley's both. We're one of the hybrids out there. So we are, as you can see from this map, the big orange dots. Those big orange dots are our community centers. So we have on this map 6 community centers here in the Houston region. We are a funded member of the Gulf Coast Consortium. We, as we say here, kind of our locations, we go where we're invited and we do what we are asked to do. So Baker Ripley, that's our community development and community-based grounding. We've been around for over 100 years here in the Houston region. And by all history books, we have been teaching ESL for all of that time in some way, shape, or form. And it is part of the resettlement house movement here in Houston, and making sure that folks were being integrated into their new communities and what that looked like. So how many people do we serve in these 6 areas with our, and again, we have ESL programs, we have GED programs for the acronyms there on the bottom for non-funded programs. That ITP, that is the internationally trained professionals that Mahalia was referring to. We do have an ESL for professionals program at Baker Ripley. We also have there the IETs, that is our integrated workforce training programs. We do some workplace literacy, so we also teach ESL at employer work sites. And then we do, of course, distance learning, which we all do at this point, thank you to the pandemic. But prior to that, we were kicking off our distance learning program and really looking at blended learning. But with all of that before the pandemic, we were serving about 1,800 students across these sites a year. And in the spirit of collaboration, the name of today, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about our initial collaboration with Harris County Department of Education, who is also a community-based organization or nonprofit that is funded as well. And so really they serve about 40% of that 1,800 number, and we serve about the other 60%. And it was a great way for us to look at and say, across Baker Ripley's community centers, there was no way that we were going to be able to serve all of the need that we saw in all of those neighborhoods. Harris County Department of Education has done a phenomenal job at our Pasadena location. And so you may be thinking, why us? If we're funded and if we're talking about collaboration, how am I coming to you today and what does that look like? So next slide, please. So today I'm coming to you from a couple different angles. So one, as mentioned, I was the CEO at Literacy Advance, which is a non-funded program with over 55 years of experience offering volunteer-led only literacy classes here in Houston. And so I was with Literacy Advance in some way, shape, or form for well over a decade, part of Literacy Texas, a huge lover of volunteers and the non-funded programs and how do we build capacity and frankly, how do we work with the funded side? And that was often one of my frustration points when I was trying to learn the systems. How do we access, if we have our students that have been described, family literacy students, maybe now they have changed their goal and they are interested in employment. How do we get them to the career offices? Or how do we get them to a training of some kind? Or how do we get them to an employer site? What does that look like? And what does that map look like? Our biggest piece that we focused on at Literacy Advance, of course, was the lowest literacy levels. And so when I had the opportunity to come here to Baker Ripley, when Literacy Advance merged with another CBO organization here in Houston, Memorial Assistance Ministries, one of the appeals was that here at Baker Ripley, our CEO, Claudia Aguirre, said, with her background in adult education and opportunity youth, said, hey, we really need to figure out how to take our funded program and really truly blend it with the non-funded side of our community development work. Where were the points where we could overlap? And more importantly, and as I knew Baker Ripley, again, was as the CEO at Literacy Advance, we placed volunteers at Baker Ripley, one of Baker Ripley's community centers, a number of years ago. And so we provided the volunteer programming for the lowest levels of literacy, Literacy Advanced did. And then we had an automatic handoff there on Baker Ripley's campus in Gulfton, which is one of the highest and most densely populated areas for ESL, refugee resettlement, those types of students. So we were right there collaborating on campus. We were able to hand off and have our volunteers be there. So that's what I came into 2 years ago when we said, okay, let's take Baker Ripley's adult ed program and let's expand it. Let's see how we can blend both. And so I'm a systems geek. You heard social work in there somewhere if you were paying attention. Social workers are proud systems geeks. And so when I came, my piece at Baker Ripley and the questions I was asking was, if we have incredible systems like Wes and Janine's system, or you're going to hear from Federico after me, and we're talking about large collaborative systems, what does it look like to have a system at the, the doing level, the provider level, the day-to-day level? And one of the areas for me internally at Baker Ripley right now is that on-ramp to training pathways. So we're able to take our funded dollars and our privately funded dollars, and we're able to have, similar to what's described, kind of readiness classes, career exploration activities. We're able to bring our workforce solutions folks in and present to our lower level classes. Excuse me, as they're checking out and doing some of the navigation and saying, okay, what is next? My goal is to get a job, which pathway, which training. And then really important, again, as a CBO and a funded organization, those training pathways, however, those IETs, those integrated training opportunities, as a CBO, we could try it in 6 different neighborhoods. We could try to be the trainer for all of our students, but why? We have both funded programs and non-funded programs that are also in those neighborhoods with us that might be doing a medical billing class, or they might be doing a phlebotomy class, or they might be doing, pick any of them. And of course, we then in Houston, a little bit different if you're a rural program joining us. In Houston, I think we have something like 5, 6, 7 community college systems in the broader greater Houston area. So how do we connect our folks, get them ready for community college? So that's a huge question for us as we're saying, okay, how do we create the system at the doing level? And then how do we refer out? Without, right now, we don't have a collect, because we're such a large system with Wes and Janine, we don't have that one way in right now. We're working on it though, which you'll hear about soon. We don't have that one way in. So yeah, how do we get them out, our students, to where they need to be and still stay in touch with them when they get connected to the community college? So that's part of that student support, that coaching and that mentoring. Our funded dollars, unfortunately, we want those pieces to match with our funded dollars, but we don't have the capacity to really deep dive in with the students. And then some of that follow-up. Once we do a referral, how do we make sure that they got there? How do we check in on them? Of course, being a community center, also wanting to say, hey, come back to the community center. We have other really great things for you and your families. But that aside, how do we then ask them the questions? And Mahalia was talking about this too, kind of that multi-layered, and Wes and Janine, the multi-layered intake, but the thoughtful questions of why are you here? But where do you want to go? And how do we help you get there? And how, if it's not us, because we're not in competition, how do we get them to another, either nonprofit funded or not, in community college? A big piece, and that was mentioned, but I think a lot of times folks, it doesn't, I know at least when I was at Literacy Advance, I used to say this loud and loud and loud and loud, often to the funded programs. Non-funded programs can have flexible hours that our students need, shorter programs. They can offer programs off semester, right? So if we have a wait list for our funded semesters, well, what happens if they miss registration? What do they do? Where do they go? How do they stay engaged? And we all know that. We all know that our students, our learners, it takes courage, it takes muster, it takes time, that moment when maybe somebody has the kids and so they can actually make the call to say, hey, you have ESL classes? What does that look like? When can I start? They might not have time to make that call again for a while. So how do we get them when they call, get them engaged across the system? So whether the system is our Baker Ripley system, whether the system is our Houston system, or whether the system is Baker Ripley plus our providers and our partners, how do we do that? What does that look like? Particularly with the pandemic, of course, digital access and digital literacy. We've been able to do that with our blended dollars, with our private dollars here at Baker Ripley. So we've been able to support Chromebook distribution, laptop loan program. We've been able to support MiFi access for internet access. But we've been able to do that and then pull in partners. So we also, once we had those resources up to 450 Chromebooks, we've had 750 MiFi units. We have a laptop loan program of 50. And again, I get some of you at Literacy Advance, when I was there, I would have been drooling, like, what? How did you find those resources? But the big piece now that I'm here at Baker Ripley is, okay, we were able to find the resources because we're a large organization, a large CBO. And so then we turned around to our non-funded partners and said, hey, we have these resources. Can we get these into your programs as well? So we partnered with upwards of almost 10 now, other non-funded programs. Hey, let's share these resources so that we can get some of this digital literacy programming, the access piece. And then when they have that, then they can tap into, our students can tap into the system that's in front of them and how does that work? So we're having a lot of other conversations at that system level around this digital component, as I know everybody across the state is, obviously with the pandemic. But to me, we don't solve this without both sides of this equation. We all have to be together to do this piece, particularly when you look at something like digital literacy. We all know this in the field. That's everything from, I haven't touched a mouse, I'm not even turning on that computer, all the way up to, I'm mostly familiar with computers, I just need some more details, I'm at a higher level, and then I could launch easily into a technology boot camp. I could just get some bridge programming and go through. So within the jobs of the future, the digital jobs of the future, I see so many opportunities for us at the doing level and at the systems level to be able to integrate and what that looks like. And anybody has any thoughts or want to contact me afterwards, I'm happy to talk about some of that, where we were able to get some of those resources. And that goes to the collaboration and the partnership and the innovation. I learned so much from both non-funded and funded partners. We can't do this work alone. So that innovation space, it really comes from, and this is the hard part about collaboration. The spirit of collaboration is always good to talk about. I think the hardest part of collaboration in the 2 decades that I've been involved with nonprofits, it requires letting go of some areas that you may have been serving in and focusing, where are you good? And those of us coming to the table saying, I'm good at this, I'm good at this, I'm good at this. Oh, we both think we're excellent at this. Let's talk about that. Let's see, because the demand is so high, let's see if we can figure out geographical splits, referral splits, somebody taking higher level versus lower level students, and then creating that pipeline and that pathway. And that doesn't happen if we're not in constant conversation with each other, if we don't leave some of our fear and competition at the door, and not to preach it, but because to say it out loud, because it is so hard. It's difficult without the money tree. We are, in fact, trying to serve with the same dollars and what that looks like. So let's shift that lens and let's shift the dollars and see where they fit the best. So that's some of the work that we're doing in Houston on a broad scale that Federico can introduce you to. And I know that he's next. So without further ado, I introduce you to Federico.
Oh, thank you, Melanie. What you were talking about is fascinating anyway, so I'm sure that they can continue listening to you for quite a while, but let me talk a little bit about what the citywide vision is now in Houston. I came to this office about a year and a half ago when the mayor created the office, the mayor's office for adult literacy in Houston, with the vision that you can read to envision a Houston where every individual can obtain the skills necessary to prosper and reach their full potential. It should say there, I just see the typo. Sorry about that typo. Their full potential. That is our vision. That is the vision of this office. And it's a big task when you consider that according to PIAC data, 1 in 3 adults in Houston are functionally illiterate. That is a monumental task if we are going to move 1 in 3 adults in this area to a level of proficiency necessary to succeed in the workplace, the family, the community, and so forth. So next slide, please. The way to do it is through collaboration. The only possible way to get ahead is collaboration. And we have a collaboration with a group called HALC. The HALC is the Houston Area Adult Literacy Collaborative. And this group has more than 50 providers. Of them, many are currently providing services online since the pandemic started. So we are talking about a network of people who have their face-to-face online, face-to-face instruction in, so to speak, brick and mortar spaces. But over the last year and a half, they moved to the online space with the rest of us. In the network also, Houston Community College, Lone Star College, and among others, Baker Ripley, who do have access to federal funds. And I actually neglected to say here, Harris County Department of Education is another one of the members of this large network. There are more than 40 community organizations that are currently providing services, so actively members of the collaborative. The collaboration includes the Houston Public Library, which is a very important partner because, among other things, they manage this mayor's office for adult literacy. The Barbara Bush Houston Literacy Foundation, that it is a critical partner, and I will explain in a moment why. And also now we are working closely with Houston Galveston Area Council that manages the funds, as you know, the funds that come through TWC. And we are now working very closely on sharing data so that we can have a system where the data, whether you are federally funded, publicly funded, or funded somehow through community organizations or foundations, we can have access to the same data. Citgo Petroleum Corporation is one of our largest partners because they funded the creation of this office. The Houston Greater Partnership, the Greater Houston Partnership, and one of their initiatives that is Upskill Houston, they are also working closely with us. And finally, ION. I don't know if you outside Houston know what ION is, but ION is now this technology innovation hub that Houston has created, and that is attracting to our city some of the biggest names in technology, including, among others, Google, that has opened doors here in downtown Houston, and Microsoft, and a number of technology startups. So the adult literacy blueprint, one of the things, probably the most important thing that we are doing right now in terms of future planning and in terms of this large collaboration, is we are developing an adult literacy blueprint for the city of Houston. We, with the support, and this is a very important support of the Barbara Bush Houston Literacy Foundation that is funding most of the effort to write a blueprint. We are working on a plan for adult literacy in our city. With the Barbara Bush Houston Literacy Foundation, we have also retained the services of Deloitte Consulting and of Gallup, the famous survey providers that have researchers that are working on something that Mahalia shared with you, which is the economic impact of low literacy. Gallup is looking at specifically at the economic impact for the city of Houston of having that large number of people who are functionally illiterate or working at the lowest level of literacy. For the adult literacy blueprint, in order to come up with this document that will inform our strategic planning, we have involved over 70 businesses, foundations, and community agencies, as well as teachers and learners to give us feedback. We have been listening to their voices, we are interviewing many of them, and we have had a number of focus groups to find out what is it that collaboration looks like at the city level. What is it that planning for adult literacy looks like? What is our role, the role of government, the role of businesses, the role of community-based organizations, the role of the community colleges? How can we come together and collaborate in order to have a strategic plan to get our city out of this current situation? So the blueprint will be unveiled soon. In fact, by the first week of June, we are planning on having a blueprint. This is interesting before I go to strategic planning, because right now we are also working in partnership with the National Barbara Bush Foundation for Family Literacy that the First Lady Barbara Bush founded over 30 years ago in Washington. They are coming up with a national action plan for adult literacy, and they are looking at Houston as the model city in the nation for how collaboration can take place and how collaboration among different entities could move the needle in terms of our challenges. So in our strategic plan, we have the following vision. We want a common on-ramp to the literacy and adult education system. Mahalia spoke of one door and many points of entry. We are talking about the same thing. We call it a common on-ramp. So there are different ways to getting to where you want to be, but with a common ramp. We are looking at, and this is something that has come very clearly through the focus groups from not only community-based organizations and their teachers, but also from the community and from businesses. We need common measures and data. That's why we are working so closely with HGAC to look at the data that federally funded programs are collect. And then we are looking at developing or adopting a shared learning management system for our network of providers. This is something that we want to fund. And once the strategic plan is completed, we are going to be looking at how we are going to fund this shared learning management system. Next slide. So we come to the strategic plan, and we need to look at three things: the philosophical premise, the challenge, and the need for advocacy. We have heard, the premise is, learners don't care who funds your program, whether it's the federal government, the state government, or the United Way, or any other foundation. They don't care. What they care is that you know how to help them. You know how to direct them in the right way. You know how to take them through this on-ramp and then help them with their goals. So that is the premise. If our collaboration needs to address demand, as we heard today a number of times, And if we need to meet the participants' objectives, well, of course, first of all, we need to know what those objectives are. And we heard about asking the learners about their goals. But we also need to be aware that the resources are limited across the board. Mahalia said that federal funds are limited, and indeed they are. I worked with federally funded programs for 27 of my 33 years in literacy. So I know that those federal funds are very limited, but so are the funds of the programs that reside or live outside the public stream of funds. So if we are going to work together, we need to be careful not to expect that we can just refer students from one side to the other. We can't, as community-based programs, say, okay, we are going to take all your low-level students, for example, and teach them ESL, and we are going to send all the high-level students to you. It may not work that way unless we have more funding. That is where collaboration and initiatives such as Baker Ripley's current initiative are important. How do we reallocate the resources? How do we move and shift resources in order to really address the demand of our students? Because resources are limited on both sides of this street in both directions. So that is the challenge. One of the challenges is the number of referrals that we can make if resources are not forthcoming. But it's not the only challenge. So one thing that we need to do is look very carefully at what is our objective. And that's why we are looking at our vision and at the numbers of people that need to be moved out of low literacy. And use, for example, systems for professional development, such as what TCOL is doing, so that with a fantastic PD portal. I acknowledge that many of our programs don't take advantage of the PD portal. And that PD portal should be available, well, it is available, but it should be taken advantage of by programs that don't get federal funds, because the resources are there and are absolutely wonderful. And I know that the team at TCOL, led by Deborah Hargrove, does a fantastic job. And they want us, those of us who work with non-funded programs, to participate in that system. But it's not only about professional development and our referrals, it's also about reimagining how our resources are used. I know that I'm running out of time, so I want to say one thing. TWC, the federal funded programs through TWC, and my office, MAL, are on the same page in terms of setting the system up for success. Mahalia's one door, multiple points of entry is our single on-ramp. We need to work together. What we need to do is to develop a mechanism for advocacy. The only way we are going to have more funds at the federal level, as well as at the local level, is through advocacy, very concerted advocacy, saying, this is what we need, this is why we need it. And advocacy will only be successful if we can go to whoever we are asking for money, the federal government or a foundation. We need to go with data, absolutely, but we also need to go with a narrative of success. Thank you very much for having invited me to speak to all of you today. And if you're interested in knowing more about MAL, our contact information is in the next slide. If you will move to the next, yeah, that one. Thank you very much. I don't know if you have questions.
So Steve, I don't know if you would like to address any questions. I think we had two. Or Mahalia. Beth, did you capture those for me? I think you did.
I did. I think the first one is actually for Melanie. any type of certification for the technology boot camp?
In terms of recognized certifications. So those are who we're working with right now is General Assembly, and recognizing how do we make sure that if you're a funded program, that the certifications are there that are then linking to employment. So I'd be happy to, one of the things I did not do is put a contact slide here. So making sure I'll drop my contact information. Whoever asked that question, feel free to reach out and I can tell you what we've been tackling. We're building a broader technology pathway also with CompTIA A+, Core 1 and 2, which is of course another side of that coin and more entry level. Your coding boot camps are typically a higher level and not typically our students, but it's getting them the bridge and the on-ramp into that that coding boot camp level. Most of our students are not going to be successful if they start at a traditional coding boot camp.
Thank you, Melanie. And that one was from Joe Barker. Then the next question, and I think this could probably be any of the panelists or even Steve from Alba. So how do you explain to funders, foundations that collaboration doesn't necessarily mean merging all these organizations? As stated in this webinar, the students we serve deserve options and the autonomy to choose the organization that helps them the best. And then I think you can see it goes on a little. So any suggestions on those questions?
This is Federico. I would say, of course, it's not about merging. Collaborating is about finding what we are best at and trying to avoid having to reduplicate or reinvent the wheel. We oftentimes come to the table to collaborate because we are tired of spinning our wheels, reinventing what has been done, or doing what somebody else is a lot more capable of doing. So that's what I would start by saying. It's not about merging, it's about identifying our strengths and asking people with specific strengths to do something that we cannot do.
And I would just like to add to that, Federico.
Yes.
In DFW, they have this program called Better Together. And what it does is it looks at what services are being provided by a nonprofit, and if somebody else is doing the same or similar services. And this is not about merging, but it's about how to complement each other. And they did it with the literacy child, early education literacy nonprofits here. And they found out that the funders are much more open to funding when they know that you're coordinating together and they know where their money is going. So, so collaboration can help build the argument that your money is well spent if you're a donor.
Yeah, I agree with that, Steve. And one of the things, Alba, or anybody, I have found over the years of fundraising, and again, most of my experience is fundraising on the non-funded side. So one, a visual is really helpful to educate. So I think a lot of funders don't understand our students and understand that our students touch almost every other type of nonprofit. And our students have a wide variety of needs in order to be successful long-term in a classroom, whoever's classroom that is. And I think it's one of the pieces, if we, particularly as non-funded providers, if we are able to visually map that and show that in some way to educate the funders that we need this whole system, this integrated system to do this work, because our students, and again, coming from a number of different fields as a social worker, our students are one of the more complex, and it's one of the more complex fields out there, even though it's the least funded, which it should not be. But we're working on that with advocacy, right? With all of us here on the call. So a visual, and then education, and making sure that they understand the complexities of the student and the complexities of the systems that we connect into, because we connect into very complex systems. reentry system, the homeless system, dropout recovery system, college system, workforce systems, parent and family literacy systems. So helping them really see that deep value. Usually, in my experience, it gets the funders to go, oh, wow, and oh, wow, we really need to support this integration.
Yeah, Melanie, at our office at Mall, as you know, because you sit on our board, our office has many of those organizations sitting on our board and working in close collaboration, because that's the only way that we're going to move the needle. I just wanted to say one more thing, and I put it on the chat, but if we're going to meet the students where they are, we really need to take advantage of the lessons learned during the pandemic. We very quickly moved to the digital environment. We need to continue doing so, regardless of who is funding our programs. We don't need long waiting lists. We need to take our students where they are and help them using the existing technology. Once again, thank you.
And with that, we're right at the end of our time. I'll just say, Mahalia, are there any final thoughts? This has been a wonderful panel discussion and led off by Mahalia. And if not, thank you everybody for being with us today, and especially thank you Mahalia Baldini and the panelists for the great insights you shared with everyone today. Enjoy the rest of your day.
I would second that, Steve, and say thanks again to our panel and those of you that have joined us. I hope everybody has a great week, a fruitful week, doing the good work that you do. And this will hopefully be one of many webinars to come in the future so we can continue to tackle the challenge here and continue to come up with innovative solutions there at your local levels. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.